Okay, well, hello and welcome to everybody. Welcome to Tele-Work, Tele-School, Tele-What, as we've been calling it here at the office. Thank Debbie Mullihan for the name there. So to get us started, I just want to say thank you to everyone who is here today, and especially our panelists. The reason that we convened you all here today is because among the business community, we have seen a need between both employers and impacted employees to have even just a discussion, whether it's to help us build empathy between each other or to come up with some creative solutions, to have a discussion about what we're all going to do as we launch into this new school year, which of course is starting fully virtual for the sake of keeping everybody safe in our current pandemic. With that, I'd love to say hello to our panelists. So first we have from Tigard School District, Dr. Sue Reiki Smith, who is our superintendent. Hello, Dr. Sue. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. We also have a licensed child care provider. Lindsay Voorhees is here from Guidepost Montessori. Hello, Lindsay. Nice to see you. Got some work going on in the background there. We also have an impacted employer. So Leanna Patron is here from Latino Build. Good morning, Leanna. Nice to see you. Who's going to give some perspectives on what it's like to be an employer who cannot support remote work, who has employees who have to come in every day and they have to be present. We also have an impacted employer, Debbie Mullihan with the Tigard Chamber of Commerce. Good morning, Debbie. Also my boss. And she is an impacted employer who can support remote work. So two very different needs going on there. In addition to that, we have Megan DeSalvo of Edge One Media. Hello, Megan, who is here as our impacted employee. So she does have children who are in the school district, and she'll be going through this with us this year. Finally, we have Tom Engel. Hello, Tom. He's with Vantage Point HR, and he is come today to give us some great perspective for employers and employees to be thinking about what is sort of the HR brain that we need to think about when considering how to care for our employees as they dive into this new world that we live in. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and encourage all of our panelists to go ahead and unmute. If you are not a panelist, if you could mute, that would be fantastic. And we will kick it off with our first question. So question one, and this is for all panelists, and I think what I'll go ahead and do for everybody's sake is I will just call on a panelist to start and lead you around like that. So the first question that we have for you are, can you speak a bit to the unique challenges being faced by the school district, remote employees and employers, as well as in-person employees and employers, given the restrictions of COVID, right? And the online schooling piece. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Ms. Debbie Mullihan to kick us off. Just to speak briefly on what are some of the unique challenges that we are facing that we potentially haven't seen before, or we are seeing them exacerbated.
So I think some of the challenges that we're facing with online schooling as well as remote work is internet bandwidth, actually, within a home. And we saw that early on in the pandemic when we all went working remote. And I know that one of my staff also had another work from home partner, as well as kids trying to do online schooling, and in your middle of a Zoom call and there's not enough bandwidth for the entire demand. So I see that as that's a tech issue, but it's very real and it needs to be figured out and addressed. I think that one of my other observations in spring when we went into kind of an online school format and teleworking was there's challenges with an employee trying to manage what the kids are doing and then manage their work schedule. And what I saw as a result of that was a more choppy work schedule. So maybe 2 hours of work here, I need an hour break because I got to manage what's going on with the kid for school. Then I got maybe a 3-hour work session, and then maybe I need another break. And then maybe I'm doing some work after like what would normally be classified as a normal work day. So I saw that. So that also makes it challenging as a staff, when staff comes together, to try to find those times when all staff could be present, like for a staff meeting, or to convene because there's something urgent that needs to be talked about and that kind of stuff. So those are the things I saw. And then I think just general welfare and mind share and a rested state of employees, particularly though, I mean, everybody struggled with this at some level during this whole initial pandemic and teleworking and managing your life and being in lockdown. But I saw it to be exacerbated for those that are also then trying to manage what's going on with their school, and your brain is just on constantly, and there's this lack of rest and recovery, and that impacts everything in your life, including work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Leanna, I'm going to kick it over to you so we kind of get that other side piece of things with employees who still have to come into work as well.
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of what we do at a Latino Build, obviously, is we service construction contractors. And as you guys all know, we're an essential field. So our contractors are essential. So they need to go in. They need childcare. Maybe they don't have somebody at home. And traditionally, for our workers, especially, they are lower income. We've known that childcare costs in Oregon are astronomical. Don't get me wrong, there is aid as well for it through the state and mostly that. But construction, the industry itself is a good prevailing wage. Just because you don't qualify for those benefits does not mean that you are still needing of it. And so we have that, balance of that. Even if they raise the rate that you could qualify for benefits through the state, workers still don't qualify. Work needs to go on. In our workers only get paid once they're doing their work. They're not on salary, they're an hourly base, and therefore, and so a lot of our workers have also used schooling as childcare. And so now there is not online or live school that they can be there for childcare. They can't afford daycare full time. And what are they doing? They're scrambling to find what that is. Is it they put their child at number one, that they can't afford full-time daycare, and then they have to do remote schooling from home on the weekends and in the evenings. Nobody likes that. And then second is maybe households don't, as well as Debbie said, in terms of bandwidth. They not only do they maybe not have bandwidth, but they don't have internet or Wi-Fi in their house. So they're maneuvering the situation off of a smartphone. How are you supposed to do distance learning from a smartphone there?
Thank you so much, Leanna. I just appreciate your insights very, very much. Megan, hello. Can you give us some of your thoughts from an employee perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the mother to two children that are both elementary school aged. And I run a business and am an employee in that business. And so to speak from that standpoint, it's very challenging to know what the schedule is going to be. Consistency, I think, is a really important thing that we didn't really have in the spring necessarily, and I'm hopeful that we will have in the fall and going onward. And just being able to manage what the children are doing and keep them engaged and keep them feeling mentally challenged and involved in that long enough to have a 1 hour Zoom call or to have, whatever that meeting might be that you have. In my position, I go back to back to back from meeting to meeting to meeting. And I may have a 10-15 minute break in between those meetings, but I don't have hour breaks. So being able to manage that effectively is really challenging. In addition to that, I think just making sure that the well-being of everyone, like Debbie had touched on, I think that the stress levels were much higher when school was in session versus over the summer right now. It's been much more manageable for our household. So I just hope that the stress levels don't jump back up. You know, I'm expecting that they will, but I do want to be sure that we're taking mental health seriously for families and for children, and making sure that we are helping those families through that.
Thank you so much, Megan. Lindsay, what are you seeing from parents who are using your services, or any insights that you have as a professional or in your field?
Sure, thanks, Catherine. For us, the biggest challenge has been the implications of remote learning for our youngest children. So we serve children ages 1 through 6 here at Guidepost, and very young children have a hard time engaging online platforms for a variety of reasons, whether it's that they don't have access to an adult to support that. There can be tech issues, there can be internet issues, and then even if all of those things are in place, the engagement is very challenging with little ones, especially in this day and age of parenting where screens have maybe been limited in the household, and we're hearing from pediatricians to limit screen time for children under the age of 2. And I think a lot of parents have really big hesitations around being able to provide that type of learning for their youngest children.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective. I'm saving Dr. Sue for last, but before I pop over to kind of shift gears and talk about the school district perspective, Tom, do you have any thoughts that you wanted to share? I know you're here for an HR perspective, but you have a wealth of knowledge as well.
Probably the biggest observation I have is that what's causing the most grief right now, from what I can see, is it's the general uncertainty. You know, when is consumer confidence going to come back? When am I going to have a stable, normal, or something I can feel I understand, so that I know when to open a store, I know when to hire people back, I know when to hire, I know things are generally going to be okay. It's almost like people are waiting for the other shoe to drop. And there's so much uncertainty around what's next. It's not what's the next rule, what's this or that. It's just, this is so new. It's causing people to pause. You know, for example, I was talking with a CPA a couple days ago, and he says to me, for example, well, my chiropractors or my optometrists, people are coming in for what they perceive currently as necessary. They're not doing anything else. And that's an adjustment from where we were maybe even 2 months ago. So it's like everyone's trying to figure out what they're comfortable with and what everyone else is doing. And it's causing this big pause in almost everything we do. And that's probably the biggest theme that I'm running into over and over again, no matter what your industry is, no matter what your situation is, with just clients and client work. When will I feel confident to do something that's forward looking? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out my now or my next 2 weeks.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, we're kicking it over to Dr. Sue with the school district. So Dr. Sue, can you tell us about the unique challenges that the school district is facing right now? Because I imagine what you're hearing right from all of us is not news to you.
Thank you, Catherine. And I really I'm grateful for the opportunity actually to come last, so I have a chance to hear all's perspective, because I think I can touch a little bit on many of those themes. I think the first piece here is to say that what happened to us in the spring was cataclysmic, not just for business and not just for us as a community and society globally, but also in terms of how we think about education. In less than 24 hours, we shifted from a brick and mortar traditional stance that has been in place, you know, well over 50 to 100 plus years, and into a virtual space. And I don't need to share with anyone that it was far from perfect. Literally every single administrator and teacher in this state felt like a first year teacher all over again, trying to figure out how do we do this? And then understanding all of the challenges that you've all articulated so very, very well. and feeling an immense sense of burden and responsibility to address those issues, and that continues. I want to share that the experience relative going into this year, where we have to start online, and again, we were hopeful that we could actually start at least in cohorts, but unfortunately the metrics are not supportive of that, and we can speak a little bit about that if that's of interest as well, how we have to balance that. So this pressure for us is balancing first the public health needs. We too are a large employer in the Tigard-Tualatin area. And so we have a workforce that is dependent upon us to keep them safe and to keep the families that they go home to safe, just as you all are. The second is relative to our students. We know that K-3, that the younger populations, because physiologically they are not as fully developed as our students ages 10 and older are, they're not as efficient at spreading the disease. But again, our workforce is blessed with individuals who've made a long-term commitment and so are pushing towards that bubble of higher risk populations when we think about close exposure for a period of time. I think the other piece with this is that we pay close attention to data. So we did a tremendous amount of surveying of parents, of students, of staff in late spring and again through the summer to try to make sure that as we are making these adjustments and refining the instruction that we give, that we're listening carefully to what the data is telling us and what our individuals are telling us. As Megan knows, we just came off of 3 very large community meetings in July, towards the end of July and first part of August. We have now broken out into smaller level meetings. There was one held for elementary parents, one held for middle, and one held for secondary. And now we are further breaking those down into actual small, what we call affinity groups. So families of our Black families, our Asian and Pac Islander families, our families that are Indigenous, our families that have students in our two-way immersion school. So broken those out. So really distilling down and listening to not just the broad themes, but the specific themes. So relative to trying to balance and help the parent out, my eldest daughter of 3 also works from home, and she has helped me also understand from her perspective with one child, the things that she has to balance. And so all of that plays into as we're trying to navigate a system and provide both structure that students need, because we know that in an instructional day, our children thrive on routine. So getting up at the same time, having breakfast at the same time, having lunch at the same time, having their instruction at the same time, all of those aid to what's been voiced relative to social emotional concerns, brings that continuity and that consistency and some grounding for students, that there's something that's normal in my day. That said, we also, my email is evenly split between those parents who say, I want a rigorous 6-hour schedule of nonstop instruction, from those parents who are saying, I can't help you with that. I need you to have opportunities where we can be more flexible. So we're trying, to be as flexible as we possibly can, while also being mindful of the guidance that we have. ODE has been very clear to us that we must provide no less than 2.5 hours of direct instruction every day. And so that means that for parents that there will be the videos if they need to do that, so it better fits into their schedule. But we're balancing that guidance against what our community is telling us that they need. I would absolutely echo the need for childcare. It is clear following a state meeting that myself and other superintendents have been on that this is going to have to be a local solution. We have been working with our current partners, Club K, YMCA, and a new partner to us, which is Champions. We believe right now that we can potentially expand to 120 slots. But here again, we are going to need our community to help us find larger facilities so that when we can shift back into school buildings, we can keep the number of cohorts of students coming through each day and not be impacted by the fact that we're also running a full-time daycare center. We know our teachers are in need. They are just as impacted as every one of your employees, but also the families that have just been listed here by Leanna. And I would share with you, Leanna, that Washington County Child Care Hub is taking a look and starting to raise the income levels, so more of your individuals may qualify than they think. and ERDC, which is a grant from the state, in many cases can bring the cost, childcare debt cost, and cut them at least in half, if not further than that. And so really encourage all to seek out and use the number 211 when seeking that type of information from the county about who qualifies, how do I qualify. There is also a tremendous need for more providers to come into the space. The state has heard that, and we know that the Child Care Division, along with the Early Learning Division, is working to try to find ways to put waivers on current bureaucratic rules and open the doors, because this is a need that's not just for our area, it is consistent across. And the last piece that I would share at this point in terms of challenges, and Debbie hit it well, is relative to internet bandwidth. And that is really both a state and a federal advocacy point where we need to get to a stance that this is just a utility that all can access, and not just some bandwidth, but bandwidth that allows for consistent instruction and from working from home. We know last year we provided 350 hotspots. We will be providing hotspots and or internet contracts. And I want to give a shout out this morning also to our foundation and our foundation head, Margie Green, who is working with us hand in glove in terms of setting up scholarships to help families access reliable and adequate bandwidth so that we can support our students who are online and cannot necessarily access other types of support from an equity perspective.
I think we can clearly say we have established what a multifaceted and challenging issue this is, and how deeply it impacts so many layers of our community, which again is why we are having this conversation. So thank you, everyone. Now that we've clearly set the foundation really for just how important this issue is, I would love to hear first from Debbie about, you guys have all this information. It sounds like you really have a pulse on what the need is. So then how, Debbie, does an employer go about gaining an understanding of that new landscape of challenges their employee may be facing? And is there any difference in this challenge for employers when it comes to, and this is where I'll grab Leanna and and Megan and some other people to jump in here, is there a difference between a teleworking capable employee and an employee who is essential and must come in? So we'll kick it off with Debbie.
So I would say, based on my real-time experience that we had back in the spring, really the best way, I think, to gain an understanding of what's going on is you really need open and constant communication with your employees. You need to create an environment that is safe for them to actually describe what is going on and not feel like they're going to be judged or it's a sign of weakness because you can't manage your work and what's going on with your kids in an online school format. I think you need to be prepared to do a lot of listening. You know, for me, I don't have kids at home anymore, and I don't have to deal with managing that. My role is to help my team manage that because they're dealing with that. And I think that shutting up and listening is probably the best thing to do, and to empathize. And I think that helping getting a good understanding of like, where are the challenges, where are the pain points, and just trying to put yourself in that person's shoes, I think is really, really critical. Because, you know, we all approach things from kind of our own filter and our own lens. And then I do think that the benefit of being able to allow teleworking for staff that are challenged with this balancing act between online schooling and work, teleworking's way better if you can offer that to an employee, because it allows better balancing between the demands of work and the demands of online school. You don't have to deal with the time chewed up with commuting back and forth to your office. It allows you more flexibility of chopping up your workday, 2 hours here, 3 hours there, 2 hours here, whatever kind of thing. So that would be my advice. And then I think the other thing is, that's what I got so far. I'll stop right there.
Thank you so much. Leanna, I'm going to kick it over to you to kind of give another perspective. Same question. How did you, or how are you going about gaining an understanding of the true needs of your employees, with those employees that must come in and they're essential?
I first want to kick it off with saying that we have dove into compiling as much information of resources that are available to them and getting it out there. That's one of the very first things we did. As soon as it started coming in, we created a brand new COVID resource page website for all of our members. But I also want to touch on that I have a unique situation as well myself. I'm running an organization, actually 2 nonprofits. I have 2 young children, one that is school age, elementary school, and one that is preschool. And I don't qualify for benefits. And I'm a sole parent. I do not qualify for any of those benefits. So I don't feel like we have addressed yet that sole and single parent in our schooling. And not to put you in the hot spot, Susan, whatsoever, but I don't feel like I have voiced my opinion, and I'm not in the Tigard-Tualatin School District. But I had to move to private school because that was the only way that I could get the learning assistance and out of a wonderful elementary school, public elementary school. So I have to add that on there for that. So I feel like we still have a lot of work to do for it. So all we've been able to do is compile information for them. Obviously we do flexibility with our in-house staffing, but we really service all of all of our contractors and then try to be support to them. And all we can really do is provide that information.
Sorry, a little mini tech issue there as I tried to get going. Thank you so much, and I appreciate the varying angles. I just cannot say enough how layered this is and how it impacts everybody in so many different ways. So thank you for sharing that piece as well. Megan, can you talk to us about whether it's personal experience, you kind of can give us 2 angles as well, as an employee, an employer, or pardon me, a parent, an employer. What are some ways that you can gain an understanding of what's going on for your employees so that you can have those honest conversations and hopefully get work done while continuing to do online education and all the other things?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think it starts with knowing how to communicate effectively with the person. So there are some people who will tell you like it is, and there are others that you have to kind of pull that out of them or talk to them in the way that they want to be spoken to. So it might be easier for them to email with you about it or text you about it, or have a one-to-one conversation. But a lot of employers I'm hearing and seeing that they're asking in group settings, and I would highly discourage that. There's a lot of times where an employee will not feel comfortable to talk in front of a group about the challenges that they're facing. Especially even, it doesn't matter what level employee they are. And I would say I can speak also from having 2 best friends that are single moms, and they're very scared about their jobs. They're very nervous about what's going to happen for them. They both are in industries where the jobs are being cut back. So to even bring up any challenges that they're facing, they're just not willing to do that. So I think that it really lies with the employer to talk with each employee individually, to really, ask multiple times in one conversation. And I can speak from, an employee of ours needed a chair, and it took us 6 times asking her about her chair setup for her to actually accept a chair from us. And I think it depends on that individual and how comfortable they are with you, but really trying to meet them in their communication method style and knowing that no one's situation is the same. Every single one of us has a very different situation.
I appreciate that. Dr. Sue, you are an employer. Can you share some of your insights or thoughts on how you go about collecting information from all of your teachers and everybody that you care for on what their needs are?
again, our most direct methodology is relative to survey. So as we were building out the options for families and parents between, do you ever see a time where you would want your child to be back in building for direct instruction versus the safety of knowing they're 100% online. So first survey went out as to which of the two models do you feel as a teacher that you are most interested in. So that's number one. Number two is relative to childcare needs. Number three, it's also understanding who has ADA accommodations that we have to work through and who may be at risk. And so these all layer upon themselves. And maybe it's not you specifically, but perhaps you are caring for a loved one at home, either an older adult that falls into that risk, or we have a number of families of teachers who are caring for loved ones who are immune suppressed, either because of transplants or because of other illnesses. And then tell us about your kiddos. Tell us about what you're navigating in terms of your needs. I certainly resonate to the single parent. We have a number of individuals who are single parents throughout our system. And so how do we balance your need relative to be it childcare or additional hours of work? And this is particularly true on our classified side where these individuals are hourly. And I'm sure it's not escaped anyone's notice the number of districts who have furloughed or laid off hourly workers to try to save dollars. And our position has been one of, I would much rather let's make sure that we understand where the needs are and where we can hold people in place and hold them harmless first. Before we go to those things that may be less essential. So again, always coming with a triage lens that says, what are our most essential services? Well, our most essential services are supporting instruction, making sure that our meal sites are up and running, having a skeleton crew relative to transportation so that we can deliver meals. And again, this has been part of a partnership with the foundation, Margie Green, and our board members and others in delivering over 850 meal boxes every week. So how do you keep that stood up? And then certainly custodial, because even though we may not be in building, there are still teachers who may need to teach from that place relative from their classroom, relative to internet access. And so all of those things have to be balanced when you're taking a look at the needs of staff and then balancing against their childcare needs, their ADA needs, their needs relative to hourly employment, and then trying to offer as much security as you possibly can while being mindful that you are managing and need to be a good steward with taxpayer dollars.
It really has me thinking too about the employee perspective and giving some grace to our employers. Just thinking about just the significant layers and levels of thought that have to go into all of this. It sounds just as exhausting on the other end of things.
Well, I appreciate that because I think every single one of the employers on this call manages that. They feel an immense burden that they are one step away necessarily for their employees about being able to meet the rent and to put food on the table and to have access to some form of benefit if they're fortunate enough to be able to offer that. And so all of that weighs heavy, I think, on every single one of us as we're trying to navigate that, and then as well as take the individual contexts into place. You're right, we're not going to hit every single one perfectly, but that's our obligation, and that's why I can speak for myself. That's why I'm in this space, is to serve our community in that way.
Oh, thank you for that. Lindsay, I'm curious, you've got people in there every day. They're essential employees. You're also seeing parents come and go. How are you staying tuned into your employees and what their needs are?
Sure, Catherine. We're in a unique position, and you know, that's important for, I think, everyone to realize. We offer a very, very large discount to our employees. So most of my guides, is what we call them in Montessori, most of my guides are moms. 3 of them are single moms. And I'm able to provide their children with extraordinary care here. It's part of our model, and it's part of what we believe in as a company, is to take care of our guides in the same way that we would take care of other families in this community. So I'm lucky that we get to operate in that fashion and provide that reassurance. It's certainly a different context than K-12 public education at this point. But you know, we do have resources to offer the community, and it's really special to be able to be the head of school in a place where my employees are able to come here each day and bring their children with them and feel safe and secure in having that as an option. So we would, you know, love to speak with and connect with any other employers who are looking to provide on-site or supported daycare. We've had with Nike's childcare recently shutting down, we've had conversations with them around how we might be able to support their employees. This is a really interestingly to say, it's an opportunity, I think, for childcare to really think more broadly and get creative around how we partner with local companies, how we work with the local school district, and we try to collectively find some solutions here. We are governed differently, we are funded differently, but we can all come to the table and we can figure this out. This is something that we can do. So we're here and sort of waiting and ready to find out how we can be of resource to the Tigard community.
Thank you, Lindsay. And I know that about you too. I know getting to know your heart and what Guidepost Montessori is all about. So thank you. Okay, Tom, our HR professional, I have a question for you. So as you've been listening to what everybody's been sharing, one thing that I note personally is that a lot of these suggestions are really different from how we culturally have typically engaged as employees and employers. We don't typically dive into conversations about what's going on at home. I think Megan touched on it really beautifully about how sometimes that has bred a culture where we're afraid to talk to our employer, we're afraid to tell them what our needs are. And back to what Sue is saying, I can guarantee that through this time, employers are not interested in losing their really amazing and highly qualified employees. So having said that, I'm curious from you, and I know you have a comment as well, but a question for you is, from an HR perspective, how does an employer navigate these varying needs across employees? And be bold about it, I guess, is my question, because we also are going to have employees who do not have some of these complexities. They don't have children at home and they're not caring for anybody. Maybe they even have more time on their hands and they may be acting differently than some of their other employees. So yeah, take it away, Tom.
Well, first off, just a thought from the comments from the last question. My personal feeling is that the enlightened, courageous stance that I'm hearing from most of the people here isn't always that common. And one of the challenges I think any employer is going to have to wrestle with fundamentally is you really don't have a choice but to venture into these uncomfortable spaces now. You may have liked to have a wall between an employee's personal life and the work environment. That ship has sailed. And if you don't get familiar with that discomfort, you are going to miss out on some opportunities and perhaps some really strong chances to solidify some amazing relationships with your employees moving forward. Technically, this isn't your job, but really, what other choice do we have? So you might as well embrace the uncomfortable and ask these questions. I mean, I'm thinking back to, again, Megan always surprises me how she changes my mind with her insights and makes me look at things differently. But yeah, don't have the group conversation. Maybe you did that in good faith, but be mindful of these things. Ask individual conversations. Maybe have meetings with everybody if you can. And if you talk about baseball or what's going on at home, who cares? But at least someone's not getting sort of singled out because, oh, they went to the boss, therefore they might have a problem. But get used to the uncomfortable, number one. And in terms of the HR ramifications, I'm mindful of what Dr. Sue said, all those things that she mentioned, the details, very, very valid. But fundamentally, this is how I look at it. It's a divide and conquer approach. Number one, get used to the ambiguity, get used to the fact that this is very different and that you're probably going to have to tailor solutions down to the individual level, and you're not going to have the convenience of a nice general policy that can apply to everybody so that you're less likely to get in trouble. It's going to be different. You're not going to have the luxury of a nice, stable environment where you can just put policies out there and feel safe and familiar. And do that. Go into individual conversations, situations. If you do something for one person, try to do your best for somebody else. But at this point, I don't think we have the choice of nice, safe solutions. You're going to have to tailor things. And then the second part of that divide and conquer is I'm still mindful of managing risk. And so number one, document what you're doing and why. And number two, make sure you have employment practices liability coverage, which a lot of people don't know about, but make sure you've got that covered with your insurance company. I don't think there's a way to play this safe here. There's no easy philosophy, solution, etc. I think it's time to take a leap of faith, do what feels right, and hedge your bets on the risk side as best you can. That would be my advice to an employer.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that very much. As a note, if you have questions for the panelists, please throw those in the chat box. We'd love to honor those later in the discussion. Okay, so I would love to chat briefly with Dr. Sue and Lindsay Voorhees. I have a question for you guys. We've touched on some of this, and after we get going, please, panelists, feel free to jump in. Leanne, I imagine you may have some insights into this as well. This is about resources. So we've kind of covered, we know we've got some challenges ahead of us, and I also know that we have some really unique and fantastic resources that are popping up. So we'll start with Dr. Sue. What resources or tools does the district envision having available to support caregiving adults who are now supervising and guiding that learning process?
Well, again, it gets back to just the nuts and bolts materials. So our district is very fortunate in that the board in 2016 had the vision at that point in time to embrace a one-to-one stance. And so where other districts potentially had to do some scrambling and work relative to making sure that there was a device in every student's hand, we are able to say that every student has K5, it's an iPad, and 612, it's a Chromebook. Additionally, last spring, we literally did a house-by-house evaluation, family-by-family evaluation relative to internet access. And so where there was not, as I earlier identified, over 350 hotspots were purchased out of district funds and E-rate. We will continue to provide that. We also left the devices. Typically, we would take those up during the summer, but because we know that students were still wanted them to have the opportunity to engage in online reading and other types of activities, and so those devices stayed out during the summer. And we'll just be doing a touch base back relative to, is it still functional? Do you need to swap it out? And so that's available. And again, as I said, we can continue to work with our internet providers, number one, to make sure that the basic package that they are offering, and so that we can support in terms of scholarships to families, actually is more than adequate for more than one child to be online at one time, and a parent as well if that's their circumstance. In terms of the childcare, I think we've put a fairly fine point to what the needs are there. And Tom, I absolutely embrace your idea relative to being willing to take risks and to step out, and I certainly agree with that. I think the challenge within a school district is that we also have to work within our collective bargaining agreements. And so it is our responsibility, and we just came off of an MOU process where we have crafted some language that hasn't been here before to try to think outside that box. But there are times where CBA language has to be navigated in ways that other employers potentially don't have to navigate that. But thinking outside the box certainly has to happen. There's no two ways around that. And so, childcare, wrapping that around, and then how to prioritize that again at 120 slots that we think we can get to right at this point. It doesn't address the needs of the Leannas and others. So that's an angst for me. How do I take care of my staff as individuals and their needs, and yet also understand that there are single parents out there that need that additional kind of support with limited resource. So how do you prioritize that resource? And that's where I think again, to Lindsay's point, I think there's opportunity for us to think collectively across our community. In terms of wraparound services, we are expanding our social emotional learning. In fact, the first week of school online will be nothing more than establishing routines, providing circles for students and opportunities to really check in on that emotional and mental health component. And as soon as we can get even small groups back in, there is guidance within ODE that shares that if we can get to 30 or less cases per 100,000, we can entertain bringing in smaller groups. The minute we can do that, and unfortunately, where our metrics are also tied, Washington County, to Multnomah and Clackamas, because we have schools in Clackamas, and over 25% of our workforce comes out of Multnomah. And right now, those metrics are tough. No one is within the ballpark. And so as soon as those metrics all come into line, we've already put into place some thoughts about how we can bring in smaller groups of students in short amounts of time during the week to really provide that one-on-one kind of care, and both from a social emotional perspective as well as from an instructional perspective. And then just the general wraparound. Again, I want to give out a shout to the Packed with Pride movement and the 850 food boxes. That's got to continue. Also in terms of how do we support our folks in getting them to the right medical care so that their health is preserved, particularly in light of our case counts. And then, what other supports do you need? And we have, out of the Student Success Act dollars, we have put in place now culturally responsive family liaisons that are specific to those affinity groups, so that they are working directly with those most impacted families and understanding what their needs are, both in terms of employment, in terms of housing, in terms of medical care, and in terms of access to food resources. And we will be standing up through our PSOs, and again, with the foundation's help, school supply drives, as well as drives for scholarships relative to internet access. And then also making sure that every family has an opportunity to fill out a free and reduced lunch form so that we can continue to expand our meal sites. The greater the numbers are that qualify, the easier it is for us to open up additional food sites for families across the district.
Thank you, Sue. My lawyer friends always tell me, like, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. And what I loved about this panel is I didn't know what all the answers that we would get. And I have to just comment on that and say that as a parent myself, something that I did notice, the social and emotional learning piece that was infused within my child's learning. And I'll just give a shout out for Granny's Wacky Surprise, which was it involved the entire family and gave us as a family a skill and a tool to use, which really brought me to the thought of employers. Encourage your employees who may be struggling to connect with their school district. Because from what I'm hearing, the school districts are working very hard, thank you, Dr. Sue, to encompass the family and encompass the student and the learning, and really look at them from a more holistic perspective. Lindsay, licensed childcare perspective, tell me, what are your thoughts on what resources are out here in the community for parents or child caring employees, we could call them?
Sure. So we were able to pivot and maneuver pretty quickly in the sort of January to March range across our sites. We have 63 sites across the world, most of them located here in the US, to offer 3 different options for our families, all of which we offer financial aid resources for. So of course, the first is in-person learning, and we follow all of the ELD guidelines as well as the state guidelines to do that safely. We've been successful at that at my site and at both of our sister campuses that are just down the road. We've all been in operation since March, and we've been able to do that safely and in a healthy way for all of our staff as well as our families. We also offer a virtual option for our families, but some of the unique things that we've been able to add are we offer virtual parenting experts. So we have we have been able to do an internal survey to find out who amongst our staff have this training and have this capacity to really designate support for families as they navigate virtual. And what does that look like? So how are these parenting experts checking in with families and guiding them as they make the choice to support their child's learning at home? We also provide the materials. So part of the virtual at home package is that we send the basic materials that are needed for the virtual programming to the home, and parents then are guided in how they would set those up and support their child to use them, and are not left having to figure out how to obtain those materials themselves. Then the third option is we offer an at-home option where we are organizing nanny shares and small pods or groups of children within the neighborhood who have similar needs and whose parents are willing to work with us collectively. We serve as an organizational tool for them. We help them find one another, and then we help them set up the parameters to ensure that that pod and that small group of children sharing a nanny would be safe. And we provide the nanny, him or herself, as a trained Montessori guide who has made the choice to want to engage with our families in this way. That guide then sets up the environment at the home that the learning will take place, and takes ownership of providing that to that small group of children. So like I said, we've had to think outside of the box. I think the biggest thing that we could maybe share with local school districts is really around this sort of virtual parenting support, and how do we figure out, we have trained professionals in our K-12 schools, we have school psychologists, we have counselors, we have folks that have some training in working with parents and supporting them. So how can we pivot to best utilize their services and think outside of the box in that way?
Lindsay, I have one more sort of question for you, because I feel like I hear it a lot and it's very anecdotal. It says, okay, schools had to close. How come childcare is open? Can you give me just a brief answer on why that is?
Sure. I would actually point you to, if you're interested, there's a New York Times article that just came out recently trying to explain this, because it's something that many of us don't know. In a nutshell, it's political, it's bureaucratical, it's also financial, but childcare and K-12 schooling have been treated differently since the onset of time. Childcare was initially provided to single women who were not married and needed childcare to be able to support themselves, and it was actually shunned, and culturally it was it wasn't revered if your child had to go to a childcare setting, because that meant that you were widowed or divorced and you were unable to provide that care in the home, which is what most mothers and women were doing at that point in time. So there's this interesting divide in sort of how childcare has been treated, and you'll hear sayings like, we're a school system, we don't provide daycare, right? So there's this interesting divide in sort of how we think about early childhood learning and childcare settings. And then if you go into the whole funding aspect, which I won't get into, the funding streams and the way that we can and can't receive funds, the way that we can pay our teachers, the qualifications for teachers, all of those are very different in the childcare/daycare versus K-12 world. And I myself say this, having been a former kindergarten teacher in the public world for 7 years, and public education is near and dear to my heart. I believe in it wholeheartedly. I want to be clear on that stance. But there's a very interesting past. Should you want to Google, why are daycares open and K-12 schools closed? It's pretty fascinating to learn more.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Leanna, can I pick on you briefly? Just your thoughts on resources in the community, or anything you really want us to know about employer or employee?
Yeah, no, thank you. I definitely have a couple, because I've done a lot of research to be able to help our members with that. One thing for all of you small business owners out there who have children and want to get a little bit of a boost, I want you guys to know that SNAP benefits, if you're self-employed, they cut your income in half. So don't think that you can't apply for those and that you won't qualify, because they cut your income in half. And so you will qualify, even though it's only for food. That's something off of your budget. It's something off of your budget that can go to something else. So, I mean, I know personally my childcare expenses doubled having school out. And so I know ERDC, it's the child care through the state assistance, that does not get cut in half like SNAP benefits does for those. But, you know, for those who don't qualify for that level, even though it has raised, private school is an option. And you know, I'm a big supporter of public school, but I want you guys to know that a lot of private schools still have assistance, even though they're not able to be live quite yet. And then, and they have financial aid that levels in which they are higher than the ones by the state. So you can still get financial aid. And, you know, and I ran the numbers myself. I'm actually paying less to have my kids in private school now than to have them in full-time child care and daycare, because I got assistance that way. So we're being creative, right? So these are tools that I'm helping out people with. And then lastly, Susan, I'm super excited to hear about what types of things are coming out in Washington County to help. And so I'm excited to hear those come out, and so I can add it to my list of resources.
Okay, we have about 15 more minutes, and I have sort of a final, I'm going to roll my final two questions together, and I'd love to hear, I'll start with Megan, from everybody on this piece. So I am curious, two perspectives. What does an employer need from their employee? What kind of information? I love, Megan, your story about the chair, right? We just need to talk about the chair. So what does an employer need in order to be able to act upon a request from an employee, right? What kind of information? And then if you gave some great insights into what it's like to be an employee as well sometimes, and how hard that can be to approach. So any insights you have on approaching your employer, and or what employees really need to hear from their employees to be able to support them.
Yeah, I think, you know, cultures in different businesses are really important. And in our business, we have a very transparent culture. We ask, you know, we ask what people eat. We ask what they watch on TV. We ask what they're doing. You know, we just talk with them about their life outside of our office. And I think it's really important, especially now in this virtual environment for us. We aren't together. We need to really check in even more and make sure that people have what they need. But from that standpoint, the employee also needs to understand that we need time to address those issues. So employers need time to act upon what it is your request is. You might need something, but if you wait until school starts, you're not going to get that support if you were to ask now. You know, now we have several weeks before school starts. We have time to digest what the requests are and to be able to provide those schedule changes or whatever that might be. And I say schedule changes because that's what I've chosen to do as an employee in my business. I am taking a few hours out of my day each day to be with my children. I did not do that in the spring, and I think that's why I had such high stress levels. And so I have protected my time and said, no, I'm going to take this chunk of time every day to be with my kids. I have the ability and flexibility to do that. I can work until 10 p.m. at night and nobody's going to get on my back. Now, other employers don't have that ability, and they do need to keep people within the confines of a daily work schedule. But I do think that they have the flexibility to say, look, you can take some of your sick time or some of your personal time and have a flexible schedule. And I think if we as employers can really address the issues that our employees are facing with some compassion and empathy, and understand that not everybody's situation is the same, and just because you might be able to do something doesn't mean that they are able to. I think that we will all come out ahead if we can really just be empathetic to one another's needs.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. Debbie, calling on you. What are your thoughts? That sort of two multifaceted piece there. What do you need as an employer, and any thoughts you may have on how an employer likes to be approached with a request?
I think that one of the best things that an employee can do when approaching their employer about, you know, I need this accommodation, you know, whatever it may be. In this particular case, it has to do with navigating this online school and work balance, is really kind of framing and explaining what the challenge looks like. Here's a day in my life. and this is what I'm navigating, right? To just, because I think that telling that, you need to tell your story, right? Instead of just coming and saying, I need this accommodation, you need to tell your story to gain understanding. And I would also say that when you're going to approach an employer, and I love what Dr. Sue said about how we as employers feel like we need to help solve the problem, and that's part of our responsibility. And part of our responsibility is to keep our teams employed and keep jobs and all this kind of stuff. So that's a burden that we carry. And so when an employee comes in and asks for whatever that thing is, also balance that with, like, don't just throw it over the wall and say, oh, I got this problem and I need you to help me fix it. But come with, here's my challenge, here's some proposed solutions I have, and also approach it from the standpoint that hopefully you like your job and you want to keep working and you care about the overall welfare of the company as well, because your job's kind of dependent upon that. So you need to kind of have that balance of, I still want to be able to do my job, I have these other things I need to do, here's some ideas that I have about how I could navigate both. Can you help me through this? Or, or what have I not thought about? What else could we possibly do? So I think approaching it from that standpoint, and I think also understanding that in asking for, whether it's, schedule flexibility or a shorter work week or reduced hours or whatever, understanding when you make that ask, that potentially has a ripple effect among your peers that are also working. Because you may have other employees that are in the same boat as you, but you may have other employees that they don't have kids at home, they're not navigating this. And so understanding how you might need to navigate that with your peers, and your boss is also going to be, so as an employer, I'm also thinking about those things like, oh, if I have this accommodation over here, but I have another employee that doesn't need accommodation, how do I manage that expectation across the employee base, right? Because, well, why do they get this flexible schedule over here, but I don't get the flexible schedule, and those types of things. And maybe Tom can comment on how to navigate that pitfall without blowing your foot off. So I think just, really sharing your story, and I think that understanding that, like, I as an employer, yes, I am bottom line focused, and the reason I'm bottom line focused in terms of the the financial performance of the organization is I want to keep people employed, and I want to continue to be able to execute the mission of the organization that supports like 300 businesses that are also trying to keep people employed. So I think when you're coming in and asking an employer, thinking about the bigger picture, but by all means, don't hesitate to make the ask, but come in with some solutions as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Leanna, what are your thoughts? Just some perspectives of that employer-employee, how to approach from either angle.
Yeah, I don't have a lot more to add because you guys had a great insight there. I would say, urging other businesses, since, I represent also a lot of small businesses, getting the education out there to them. And I know that you guys do a great job at that, the chamber as well. But giving that information to small businesses so they know, because if I could get them all to watch this, a video, that would be great. But making sure that it's out there and resources are publicly available.
I'm glad you brought that up because just so you all know, I am taking lots of notes. And so what will come out of this, in addition to the beautiful video that we're making, will be a little facts sheet about what you guys all had to share from your incredible perspectives and wealth of knowledge. So thank you for that. Lindsay, do you want to share your perspective on approaching your employer and employers approaching employees to solve problems?
I don't think I have much to add there. I think, again, the message that I really want to share is that, we all have to work together. We all have to try to see this from all of the angles. When you approach your employer thinking about how it impacts the company, the supervisor, your colleagues, and then vice versa. So you know, we're here, we want to collaborate and support in any way we can. I just urge everyone to really think outside of the box and find ways that we can navigate together through this. And I'm confident we can.
Thank you. Dr. Sue, do you have any more insights, perspective to share with us?
No, except just again, gratitude for all of the members on this panel and the way in which they are working to think outside the box in some, very challenging conditions. And I really resonate to what Debbie Molahan said earlier in June, I believe, the first board meeting I had the privilege of sitting in on, when you talked about the fact that there is no normal anymore, that we are moving forward, and that things like this act as a crucible to help us shed the things that are getting potentially in our road, to use Tom's analogy, and keeping us from taking risks that probably we need to take as a business community and public education and society, so that we can move forward to create the type of community that I think we all want and desire to have. And so for as difficult and challenging as this all is for all of us, the fact that we can pull together in community, if that's the only lesson we learn out of this, we will be well served going forward. Instead of looking to someone else to solve our problem, how do we come together and listen deeply? And Debbie, I'm right there with you. Many of you may or may not know I come out of having been a trauma nurse, where listening to the patient was key. So you listen deeply to understand the problem, and before you say, well, here's the solution to the problem. No, you listen, and then how do we collectively address those needs? But coming into that space with solutions as well as problems is key. We can get hung up on those problems and feel defeated, or we can say, okay, this may not be easy to do, but it's the right thing to do. And if we do it in community and we do it together, that'll be a glorious solution. And we will have done a great thing when we come out on the other side. So community is all, partnership is all. Grateful to be part of a process that thinks that way.
Thank you. It reminds me, maybe, I know Debbie's heard me say this, maybe some of you have heard me say this, and I'll throw it out there. I just want to dream for a minute. Can I just dream really quick with you? And sometimes the solutions, that you bring forward don't work, but it's okay to dream, and I think it's a good idea to throw them at the wall and see what happens, because collaboration can kind of build out of that. To close this out, I'd love to go to Tom, our HR professional. You've heard kind of a lot, again, back to that culture piece. We are a culture who doesn't really like to share. We keep things private. We keep them together. A lot of encouragement here from employers and employees to change that a little bit. And I'd love an HR perspective on all these pieces that you've heard today.
What I like about what Debbie and Dr. Sue and so many of you are saying is, in terms of creating an environment where people can have a conversation. I think one of the ways I've described this in my work is invite people into the problem, as it were. Yes, come with solutions, but bear in mind you're looking for something that could be a win-win or better than where you are now, but be willing to have a dialogue and a thoughtful dialogue. I mean, I'm thinking of what Dr. Sue said too. They did all that work beforehand. They didn't just throw resources and good intentions at things or solutions. They managed to, either through just the discipline before this hit or in the chaos, they managed to get good data and get down to, no, these are the families, this is what we know they need to the best of our ability, and we're going to deploy those resources. That's the type of thoughtful intentionality that I think as a philosophy we need to pursue. And one of the reasons I do touch on kind of context and philosophies and about how to approach things is, it's been my experience, especially with what I do, I can show people a library of HR rules and laws and details, et cetera. That stuff washes over people and their eyes glaze over and they don't quite know what to do with it. So what's the context? I mean, how do you even know how to chart a path? That's why these discussions are important. That's why Dr. Sue's example is important. This is why, Debbie's example is important, and Leanna and Lindsay, all these examples, all these perspectives are really, really valuable. And this is probably where, from a philosophy perspective, my stubbornness is actually useful. there are no clean and easy answers. There might be a few, but what if, like Dr. Seuss said, what if this is just hard? Maybe if it's just work and we just have to do this. I refuse to believe that we can't do better. I'm not under the impression that this is going to be painless, easy, or that we're even going to have all the answers and everyone's going to be whole at the end. But I refuse to go into these types of discussions with a defeatist attitude that there's not a solution just because we can't think of one now. And so if I'm able to work with people like you or anybody that, damn it, they just want to try, they want to make this work somehow, those are the types of people, those are the types of discussions I want to have. And so, yes, we can keep you safe. Yes, we can keep you compliant. Yes, we're in a new world. Choose to adapt somehow. It's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay to be scared, nervous, etc. I don't dismiss that. I still refuse to believe we can't be better or we can't make this work somehow, as imperfect as this situation is.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that so much. So that sort of concludes our official questions. We originally had slated for 20 minutes of open it up to question and answer. I don't know that we'll need that today. So I want to offer one more opportunity for any of our panelists. Is there anything that you didn't get to say that you'd really love to? Please unmute and do that. And no unmuting, no waiting.
I do.
Oh,
I am muted.
yes, go Debbie, go.
I think one of the other things I would encourage for employers that I didn't cover in my answer is really understanding what the tech tools are out there that are available. So not only are there maybe financial resources like Leanna noted and those types of things, but what tech can you be taking advantage of within your business that can enable you to stay connected with your employees, whether they are on site or off site. And so as an example, for the chamber, when we went into the early shutdown, we'd already been using Microsoft Teams and we'd already been using Zoom. So we just kind of ramped that up about 10 notches to utilize that to stay connected. So we were still having staff meetings, we were still doing one-on-ones, but we were using that tech. And we also in the process have implemented using both Slack and HubSpot. So what we're doing with Slack, Slack's kind of replaced what we were using Microsoft Teams for to a large degree. We can have conversations with each other via our Slack channel, and we've divided it into different categories. And so it's a way to, like, instead of like, oh, I'm gonna run over somebody's office, I'm gonna interrupt them in what they're doing. I have this thought, you need to know this, I'm gonna slap it over here, and when you've got 10 minutes, you can look at it, kind of thing. That has really improved our efficiency. It's an online tool, so it can be used in either an in-work setting or a remote setting, but it's a really good way to stay connected. And it's got a mobile version on it, so if you need to have it on your phone for some reason, you can do that as well. And then HubSpot is where we're actually tracking a lot of our work activity. And what that's enabling us to do is, whether we were in or out of, working in the building or working out of the building, it's enabling us to start getting our arms around what each one of us is doing and what that work stream looks like in the event that one of us is suddenly out of commission, like we're not online anywhere, right? We gotta take a break or whatever kind of thing, so that the business can continue to move forward. And all of those tools that well, Zoom costs some money, but not a ton. All those tools that we're currently using, we're using a free version of Slack, we're using a free version of HubSpot thus far. We'll probably upgrade because we need some more capacity. Zoom we're paying for, and Microsoft Teams to a certain level is also free. So I would really encourage, I know technology is scary, and I also know that depending on the bell curve of your employment base, some employees will have an easier time adapting to technology than other employees will. So I think you're gonna also have to figure out, if I have an employee that's really kind of technology adverse, how do I help get them over that? Because quite frankly, that I think is the future, and we're not going backwards from that. So all of us, regardless of our mindset, our emotional age, or our biological age, need to grapple with that and figure out how to utilize those tools.
I want to touch on
go
that too, actually. So we actually have implemented some new tech in our household as well. And I would say that I use Alexa to schedule out my children's day, and she reminds them at the top of each hour what the next thing is to do. She can remind things multiple times per hour, but for me, it's the top of each hour just to say, Jackson, here's what you do, and my daughter, here's what you do. And to be able to go through that, it's really nice. On Sunday, we discuss with the children what their schedule is, and then she reminds them when I'm unable to, because I might be on a call or doing something else where I'm engrossed in what I'm doing. And so lean on that tech to help you in both personal and professional. And then I would also say time management. So, if you keep on jumping from task to task, but you aren't chunking them together. So, doing all your emails at one time or all of your, Zoom calls at one time, that actually can really help free up some time in your schedule and day. And you'd be surprised how much time you have for other things.
Thank you, Megan. And I'll add to that too, that kind of what Debbie was talking about with systems, so that if somebody's unavailable, it happens frequently with kids. Suddenly something happens and you need to be present for that. But when they're at school on a physical campus, they're able to engage with their teacher, get that need met. Now I'm doing that. And so I find more often oops, this happened, way more than it would normally happen or interrupt my work day. And so building those sustainability systems, I'll say from an employee perspective, gave me a lot of confidence that that I can handle both, that it'll be okay if all of my stuff is listed here, so we can continue the work of the business if I do need to step out, and then I don't have to have any of that mom guilt and mom / working parent guilt that can happen sometimes. So, and Megan, thank you. What a great suggestion. I'm going to be using that. I haven't done that yet. Okay, with that, I think I want to say bye to all of our panelists and thank you guys so much for this. This is being turned into a video. Again, there's going to be a great, I'm going to call it a best practices information sheet that will come out of all of your amazing suggestions and ideas and things that you're already doing. So thank you. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.